Hey there, Daily Gardeners. Really quick, Jennifer here. I just wanted to reach out and let you know about Podchaser. And this year, during the month of April, just like last April, they have launched their Reviews for Good campaign. And this is really important because every time you leave a review on Podchaser, they will donate 25 cents for your review and then 25 cents for my reply to World Central Kitchen. And it is all going to help the Chefs for Ukraine efforts. It's an initiative aimed at providing meals to individuals and families fleeing from Ukraine. And so far, they have served 1 million meals to those in need. And so I am very excited to be part of this cause. So what I'm asking is that you leave a review for the Daily Gardener. Even if you've already done so, even if you did it last year, they will still donate 25 cents for your review. And then I will reply to every single review over at podchaser.com. And with your help, we will make this year the most impactful Reviews for Good yet. So write your review over at podchaser.com. And then if you want to share that review on social media, the social media of your choice, make sure to use the hashtag Reviews for Good and let other people know so that we can help out World Central Kitchen. So easy to do and so much good can come from it. Today's episode is brought to you by the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about garden history and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and today is April 8th. Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad. Today in garden history, we celebrate the birthday of the German botanist Hugo von Mohl, who was born on this day, April 8th, in 1805. One newspaper called Hugo the greatest botanist of his day. Hugo discovered mitosis, and he discovered chloroplasts, describing them as discrete bodies within the green plant cell way back in 1837. Then less than 10 years later, he was describing the sap in plant cells as the living substance of the cell, and that's when he created the word protoplasm. And it was on this day, back in 1859, that the Ohio legislature named Alliance, Ohio, the Carnation City, saying, quote, "Truly, it is the home of Ohio's state flower, thanks to the work of the amateur horticulturist Levi Lamborn." In 1876, Levi ran against his friend William McKinley for Congress. And before every debate, Levi would walk over and give William a Lamborn red carnation to wear on his lapel. Levi had propagated and named the Lamborn red carnation from seedlings that he'd received from France. After William won the election, he considered the Lamborn red carnation his good luck charm, his lucky flower, and he always wore a Lamborn red carnation during his successful campaigns for the governorship of Ohio and for the presidency of the United States. William wore a Lamborn red carnation when he was sworn into office, and he was also wearing one when he attended the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York in September of 1901. And at that fateful event, he removed the carnation and gave it to a 12-year-old girl named Myrtle Ledger, and he said these words to her, "I must give this flower to another little flower." Well, unfortunately, minutes later in the receiving line, William greeted his assassin, Leon Salgas. President McKinley lingered for 8 days after being shot twice before finally succumbing to infection. And when William McKinley's funeral train passed through Alliance, Ohio, the train tracks were covered in Lamborn red carnations. 3 years later, the Ohio General Assembly named the scarlet carnation the official Ohio floral emblem. And the resolution reads, even though the first mention of the dianthus genus of plant is traced to some 400 years before the birth of Christ, it was not until a native son of Alliance, Ohio, Levi L. Lamborn, worked his floricultural magic that it bloomed as the matchless symbol of life and love that it is today. Representative Elijah Hill from Columbiana County said this: "England has the rose, France has the lily, Ireland the shamrock, Scotland the thistle. To these ends, we seek to adopt the scarlet carnation as Ohio's floral emblem." 55 years later, on this day, in April 8th of 1959, Alliance, Ohio became the Carnation City thanks to the work of Levi Lamborn. And every year since 1960, Alliance holds a Carnation Festival. And this year, in 2022, the 10-day event takes place between August 4th and August 14th. And today we also celebrate the birthday of Gladys Marie Smith, who was born Mary Pickford, America's sweetheart and a Hollywood legend. She was born on this day, April 8th, in 1892. Mary was a lover of trees, and if you jump on Twitter and search for Mary Pickford tree, you'll see images of Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford, and they were planting a tree at their Pickfair estate on Arbor Day. Mary Pickford was also the first person to plant a tree. It was a Japanese cedar in the Forest of Fame at the California Botanic Garden. And trivia and folklore says that Mary Pickford used to eat flowers, especially roses. Katie Melua sang about Mary in a song that goes, "Mary Pickford used to eat roses, thinking they'd make her beautiful, and they did, one supposes." Well, in real life, Mary did indeed eat roses. She revealed in her autobiography called Sunshine and Shadow that as a young girl living in Toronto, she would buy a single rose and eat the petals. She believed that the beauty, color, and perfume of the rose would somehow transform her. Mary starred in Madame Butterfly in 1915, and that movie, if you get a chance to watch it, was shot in the Japanese garden of Charles Pfizer's Bernardsville, New Jersey estate called Yadamos, which is the word someday spelled backwards. The elaborate 3.5-acre Japanese garden at Yadamos, complete with a lake filled with Japanese goldfish, a tea house, and a hooped and arched bridge, looked like it had been there forever when it was featured in Madame Butterfly in 1915. But in reality, the garden was just 9 years old. Very impressive. And finally, today, April 8th, is the birthday of First Lady Betty Ford. She was born on this day in 1918. As a woman, Betty Ford consistently defied the odds. She was an incredible trailblazer and very open about her struggles with alcohol and breast cancer. Betty revolutionized addiction treatment, and she opened her center when she was in the middle of working on her own recovery. And today, the Betty Ford Alpine Gardens are a fitting living tribute to this wonderful woman. Known as Vail's Alpine Treasure, the garden was founded in 1985 by the Vail, Colorado Alpine Garden Foundation, and then it was renamed in honor of Betty 3 years later in 1988. Today, over 3,000 species of high-altitude plants play host to children's programs, horticultural therapy, and conservation initiatives. In 1991, Betty was waxing poetic about her life and her love of gardens. She said, "When I was a little girl, I spent many cherished hours with my mother in her garden. She wisely marked off an area for my very own plants. And as we worked together, she nurtured me as she nurtured my love of gardening. And this nurturing mother-daughter relationship, with its love growing strong in a garden, has been passed along to my own daughter, Susan, and to her 2 girls. And I love that. Love of the garden being passed down through the generations. What a wonderful gift. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Immersion by Nola Anderson. And I'm asking for my very own copy of this book for my birthday. I borrowed a copy so that I could review it for today's show. But this is such a good book. This book came out on April 13th of 2021. So we're almost at the year anniversary of this book. And the subtitle is Living and Learning in an Olmsted Garden. Now, here's the setup for this book. And by the way, the cover is so fantastic. I'm going to tell you about it in a minute. But let me just set the stage for how this book came about. This book happened because a woman named Nola Anderson and her husband purchased a property called The Chimneys way back in 1991. Now, this happened to be an estate that Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. had designed the gardens for. It was a very, very, very special place, but it had been neglected and had fallen into ruin by the time Nola and her husband got a hold of it. So this story reminds me so much of Sissinghurst, and I love that when people revive old spaces like this that are so, so special. Now, one of the things that I appreciate about Nola is that when she walked on to the Chimneys property way back in 1991, guess how much she had in terms of gardening experience? Well, the answer would be a big goose egg. 0, none, nada. She had never gardened in her life. And it reminds me of that old saying, ignorance is bliss, because maybe if she had been a gardener, she might have looked at that property and said, oh, it's too much work, I'm walking away. But instead, she and her husband committed to renewing this incredible seaside garden. And it took them 3 decades to do this work. It was completely hands-on, and it was a true labor of love. Now, to give you a little bit of a backstory about this fabulous garden, this garden got created at the turn of the century in the 1900s. Between 1902 and 1914, there was a wealthy Boston finance guy named Gardner Martin Lane and his wife Emma, and they hired Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. to create an Italianate garden for them. And you can imagine the scene. They buy this seaside garden. There is a bluff, and then there are a series of garden terraces that gradually taper down to accompany the natural topography of the land there. And so you have the very top terrace called the water terrace that features a rose-covered pergola. There is a shelter up there that, of course, has a stunning view of the terraces below and the ocean. And then there is this most incredible water feature that makes the cover of the book, and it was inspired by a 16th century country villa estate in Italy, and it's called Villa Lante. And in the Facebook group for the show, over in the Daily Gardener community on Facebook, I shared a video of Monty Don walking through this incredible garden. In fact, Monty says that this garden, Villa Lante, is the prime example of an Italian Renaissance garden and the inspiration for Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. when he was working for the Lane family. And so can you imagine any higher inspiration than this garden, Villa Lante? I mean, just incredible. Now, let me tell you the names of these other terraces because they are equally stunning, but it's that top terrace with the water feature that is just truly amazing. But the next terraces are the Overlook Terrace, the Lavender Terrace. Can you imagine how that must smell? Then the All-White Tea Terrace. I love that. The camellias there. And then the Vegetable Garden. the crab apple allay, that must be spectacular in springtime, and then finally, the luxuriant rose garden. What a way to finish. So how lucky is Nola and her husband that they were able to stumble on the Chimneys estate in 1991 and then bring it back to life. I mean, it really was the chance of a lifetime. And don't you just love stories like this? People that stumble on these forgotten gems, these gardens from our past, and then help usher them through a transformation where they are able to reclaim their former glory. Now, before I forget, I want to mention that Clint Clemens is the photographer for this book, and he did a truly magnificent job. The photography is absolutely stunning. This book is 293 pages of the Chimneys. It's a garden on my bucket list, and I hope I get a chance to see it. You can get a copy of Immersion by Nola Anderson and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for about $50. It's an investment, but it's well worth it. Finally, we end the show today with a botanic spark that celebrates the American writer and poet Barbara Kingsolver, who was born on this day, April 8th in 1955. A daughter of Kentucky, Barbara graduated from DePaul University and the University of Arizona. She worked as a freelance writer before writing novels. And since 1993, her books have made the New York Times bestseller list. Her 1998 book, The Poisonwood Bible, brought critical acclaim and tells the tale of a missionary family in the Congo, a place that Barbara knew briefly as a child when her parents worked in public health. Then in 2007, Barbara shared her family's quest to eat locally in a marvelous book called Animal Vegetable Miracle. And in it, she wrote these words: "Spring is made of solid 14-karat gratitude, the reward for the long wait." Every religious tradition from the Northern Hemisphere honors some form of April Alleluia. For this is the season of exquisite redemption, a slam-bang return to joy after a season of cold second thoughts. She also mused, "I have seen women looking at jewelry ads with a misty eye and one hand resting on the heart. And I only know what they're feeling because that's how I read the seed catalogs in January." So true, Barbara. You're preaching to the choir. Well, that's it for today's show. Just remember that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. The next time you're over at Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and then request to join. And if you'd like more of The Daily Gardener, you can subscribe to the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. And don't forget that you can also show your support for the show by using the Buy Me a Coffee link over at the website or in today's show notes. This is Jennifer Ebling. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.